You know what really gets under my skin? When folks tell me they're confused about what's happening with their Social Security checks. And I get it because every time you turn on the news or scroll through Facebook, there's another headline screaming about stimulus payments, SSI increases, and benefit changes that sound too good to be true. Well, here's the deal. I'm going to cut through all the noise and give you the straight truth about what's actually happening with the $1,330 monthly SSI payments and these so-called $2,000 stimulus checks everyone keeps talking about. Now listen carefully, because this information affects millions of Americans who depend on Social Security income to make ends meet. The Supplemental Security Income Program, that's SSI, has specific payment amounts that change based on cost of living adjustments. And understanding exactly what you qualify for could mean hundreds of dollars difference in your monthly budget. We're talking about real money here, not some pipe dream or clickbait promise. And those stimulus check rumors, they're running wild, but very few people are explaining who actually qualifies when payments arrive and what income requirements you need to meet. That's exactly what we're unpacking today. No fluff, no confusion, just the facts you need to plan your financial future. Let me start by telling you something that might surprise you. Most people have absolutely no idea what the difference is between Social Security retirement benefits and supplemental security income. They think it's all the same thing, and that confusion costs them money every single month. See, Social Security retirement is what you've paid into your entire working life through those FICA taxes that came out of every paycheck you ever earned. That's your money coming back to you. But SSI, that's a completely different animal. Supplemental Security Income is a needs-based program for people who are elderly, blind, or disabled and have limited income and resources. And here's the kicker. You don't have to have worked a single day in your life to qualify for SSI because it's funded by general tax revenues, not your Social Security taxes. Now, when we talk about that $1,230 monthly payment, we need to get crystal clear on what that number actually represents. As of right now, the federal benefit rate for SSI stands at $943 per month for an individual. That's the baseline. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is where a lot of folks miss out on money they're entitled to receive. Many states add what's called a state supplement on top of that federal payment. Some states are generous with these supplements, while others don't offer them at all. When you add up the federal payment plus certain state supplements, you can get closer to that $1,330 figure we're talking about. California, for instance, provides substantial state supplements. New York does too. But if you're living in a state that doesn't supplement, you're looking at that base federal amount. And I want you to understand something else that's critically important. These numbers change every single year based on something called the cost of living adjustment, or COLA. The Social Security Administration looks at inflation. They examine the consumer price index, and they adjust benefits accordingly. Some years that adjustment is minimal. We're talking 1 or 2%. Other years, especially when inflation is running hot, like we've seen recently, those adjustments can be more substantial. The problem is that even with these cost of living adjustments, many seniors find themselves falling behind because the costs that matter most to them, healthcare, housing, food, often rise faster than the official inflation rate suggests. Let me break down who actually qualifies for SSI, because this is where rubber meets the road. First off, you've got to be either 65 or older, blind, or disabled. That's the medical requirement. But then comes the financial test, and this is where it gets strict. Your countable income has to be below a certain threshold. What's countable income? Well, not everything you receive counts. The first $20 of most income doesn't count. If you're working, the first $65 of earnings doesn't count, and only half of earnings over that amount counts. But here's what does count. Social Security benefits, pensions, money from friends or relatives, and free food or shelter. That last one catches people off guard all the time. If you're living rentrée with your daughter, that counts as income, and it can reduce your SSI payment. Then there's the resource limit, and this is brutal for some folks. You can't have more than $2,000 in countable resources as an individual or $3,000 as a couple. Your house doesn't count. One car doesn't count, but savings accounts, stocks, bonds, those count. I've seen people who desperately need SSI benefits but have $2,500 in a savings account their grandmother left them. And that $500 over the limit disqualifies them completely. It's not that they're wealthy. They're just $50 a month away from being destitute, but they don't qualify because of a rigid rule. And that's where good financial planning and understanding these regulations becomes absolutely critical. Now let's talk about these stimulus check rumors that are absolutely everywhere right now. I'm going to be blunt with you. Most of what you're reading on social media about new stimulus payments is either outdated information, completely false, or deliberately misleading to get clicks. The last major round of federal stimulus checks went out in 2021 as part of the American Rescue Plan, and those were for up to $1,400 per person. Since then, there have been no new federal stimulus payments approved by Congress. Zero. None. So, when you see headlines screaming about $2,000 checks coming your way, you need to pump the brakes and read the fine print. However, and this is important, some states have issued their own relief payments. California sent out middle-class tax refunds. Colorado issued tabore refunds. Other states have done similar programs. These are state-level initiatives, not federal stimulus checks. And they have their own eligibility requirements based on your state tax returns, your income level, and when you filed. The amounts vary wildly. Some people got a couple $100, others got more. But calling them stimulus checks is misleading because they're really tax refunds or surplus rebates, and they're not happening in every state. What really frustrates me is when people are counting on money that doesn't exist. I'll get calls from folks who've arranged their entire budget around a stimulus payment they read about online, and then it doesn't show up because it was never real to begin with. That's dangerous. That leads to overdraft fees, missed bills, and financial chaos. So here's my advice. If you hear about any payment from the government, go directly to the source. Check the Social Security Administration website. Check your state's Department of Revenue website. Don't rely on Facebook posts or YouTube videos that promise you money without showing you the official documentation. Let me circle back to SSI for a minute because there's another piece of this puzzle that affects thousands of people. Eligibility reviews. The Social Security Administration conducts periodic reviews to make sure you still qualify for benefits. If your financial situation improves, maybe you inherit some money or your income goes up, you could lose your benefits or have them reduced. This is why I always tell people to report any changes in their circumstances immediately. Don't wait for the government to find out, because if they discover unreported income or resources during a review, they can demand repayment of benefits you weren't entitled to receive. And those overpayment notices can be financially devastating. I also want to address something that doesn't get talked about enough. The application process for SSI is not simple. It's not like signing up for a library card. The Social Security Administration needs proof of your age, proof of your citizenship or legal residency, information about your living arrangements, details about all your income sources, documentation of all your resources and assets, and medical evidence if you're applying based on disability. Many applications get denied the first time around, not because people don't qualify, but because the paperwork wasn't complete or the documentation wasn't sufficient. And when you get denied, you have the right to appeal. But that appeal process can take months or even years depending on how backed up the system is. Here's something else that blows people's minds. If you're receiving SSI, you automatically qualify for Medicaid in most states. That's huge. We're talking about health coverage that can save you thousands of dollars a year in medical expenses. Some folks don't even realize they're eligible for Medicaid once they start receiving SSI, so they're paying out of pocket for things that could be covered. Additionally, in many states, SSI recipients qualify for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. These benefits can stack, and when you put them together, they can make a real difference in your quality of life. But I've got to tell you, the system is complicated on purpose, or at least it feels that way sometimes. You've got federal benefits, state supplements, Medicaid, SNAP, possibly housing assistance, energy assistance programs, and each one has its own application process, its own eligibility requirements, and its own bureaucracy. It's exhausting, especially if you're elderly or dealing with a disability. This is why I always recommend that people reach out to their local area agency on aging or a benefits counselor who can help navigate all these programs. These resources exist, but you've got to know to ask for them. Now let's talk about what happens when you're receiving both Social Security retirement benefits and SSI, because this is more common than you might think. If your Social Security retirement check is really small, maybe you didn't work many years, or you had low earnings, you might still qualify for SSI to bring your total income up to that federal benefit rate. The Social Security Administration will reduce your SSI payment $4 by the amount of your Social Security benefit minus that $20 general income exclusion I mentioned earlier. So if you're getting $400 in Social Security retirement, your SSI would be reduced accordingly, but you'd still end up with more total income than if you were just receiving receiving one or the other. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is not planning ahead for these benefits. They hit retirement age or they become disabled, and suddenly they're scrambling to figure out what they qualify for and how to apply. By that point, they might have already made financial decisions that hurt their eligibility. Maybe they cashed out a small retirement account and put it in savings, pushing them over that $2,000 resource limit. Maybe they started receiving help from family members without realizing it would count as income. Planning matters. Understanding the rules before you need the benefits can save you thousands of dollars and months of hassle. And here's something that really gets overlooked. SSI payments are not subject to federal income tax. That money comes to you tax-free. Your Social Security retirement benefits, on the other hand, might be taxable depending on your total income. So, when you're doing your financial planning, you need to understand which income sources are taxable and which aren't, because that affects how much money you actually have to spend on your day-to-day expenses. Let me also address the cost of living adjustment that happened recently, because this directly impacts both Social Security and SSI recipients. The COLA is calculated based on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. That's a mouthful, but essentially it's a measure of inflation. When prices go up across the board, the COLA goes up to help benefits keep pace with rising costs. The challenge is that the things seniors spend money on, prescription drugs, medical care, housing, often inflate faster than the overall CPI suggests. So, even with a cost of living adjustment, many retirees feel like they're losing ground financially. What I want you to understand is that these programs exist to provide a safety net, but they're not designed to make you comfortable. They're designed to keep you from falling into complete destitution. The federal SSI payment of $943 a month is not a lot of money to live on. Even with state supplements pushing it higher, we're still talking about income levels that are below the federal poverty line in many cases. This is why it's so important to have other resources, if at all possible. Personal savings, family support, subsidized housing, whatever you can piece together to make ends meet. I also need to mention something about representative pays, because this affects a lot of SSI recipients who can't manage their own finances due to mental or physical limitations. A representative payee is someone appointed by the Social Security Administration to receive and manage benefits on behalf of someone who can't do it themselves. This could be a family member, a friend, or a professional organization. The payee has a legal responsibility to use those funds for the beneficiary's needs: food, shelter, clothing, medical care. They have to keep records and file annual reports with Social Security. It's a serious responsibility, and unfortunately, there are cases where payees abuse their position and misuse funds. If you're serving as a representative payee, or you have one managing your benefits, it's crucial to understand the rules and responsibilities involved. The bottom line is this: Social Security and SSI are complex programs with strict rules, and the information floating around online is often incomplete, outdated, or just plain wrong. If you want to know what you're entitled to, you need to go to the official sources. Call the Social Security Administration directly. Visit your local Social Security office. Get your information from SSA.gov, not from random websites promising you money. And please, for the love of everything, don't make major financial decisions based on rumors about stimulus checks that may or may not exist. Your financial security is too important to gamble on bad,